Foreign Minister Zbigniew Rau in his capacity as OSCE Chairman in office. We had a chance to focus on OSCE related issues, the challenges of the European security architecture, and to exchange views on our own challenges as a sitting and an incoming chair of the OSCE. The advice and lessons learned and shared by the chairman in office Rao will be of great help as we are about to assume the OSCE chairmanship in 2023. We value and commend all their efforts in navigating the organization during these turbulent times. The OSCE region is nowadays facing one of the, if not the most serious crisis since the foundation of our organization. We are witnessing an ongoing aggression against a participating state with dire humanitarian, political, and socio-economic consequences. These will be lingering for years to come, eroding the very foundation of the OSCE. We agreed with Foreign Minister Rao that it is our task as part of the OSCE Troika to protect and promote the OSCE principles and commitments in times when they are seriously challenged. We also agreed that in whole honesty, we have to deplore that our common efforts invested in the trust and dialogue for years within the OSCE were so easily abandoned. We strongly condemn that the use of force was chosen over dialogue and cooperation. Political dialogue has no alternative and is the only rightful response to halt the atrocities and further escalation of the war. This war of aggression by the Russian Federation, unprovoked and unjustified as it is a threat for all of us, for our way of life, our freedom, and our democracies. It is a threat for our organization too. Its endurance, despite various multilateral and bilateral efforts, continue to seriously threaten the stability, human, and overall security of the whole OSCE region and beyond. Finding the way forward is an imperative. There is no other way out than the diplomatic one. Thus, we will have to dig deep to our reserves of resilience and find avenues for OSCE's role in mitigating crisis and its pre-war capacities in promoting democracy, human rights, and cooperative security. I strongly believe that our organization should continue to play an instrumental role for managing the conflicts across the overall region, and thus it should remain capacitated, especially in the light of the war in Ukraine and the possible spillover effect and the risks for reigniting the protracted conflicts and expanding the zone of conflicts. With a shrinking space for multilateral engagement and dialogue, the OSCE remains one of the most relevant platforms for security cooperation and high-level diplomatic engagement between countries east and west of Vienna. Therefore, we need to stick to its relevance and proven utility. For us, chairing the organization is an immense challenge. We see it as a prime responsibility, but also as a great opportunity to further establish North Macedonia as a serious and reliable partner of the international community and an active multilateral actor. Our mission in 2023 will be clearly influenced by the security situation in and around Ukraine. Nevertheless, just as Poland, we stand ready and willing to engage all possible resources and try to turn crisis into an opportunity and conflict into a dialogue. Thank you so much for your attention. Minister, please.
Dear guests, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, let me thank Minister Bujar Osmani for today's fruitful meeting. We have tackled all the important issues regarding the OSCE agenda, including regional and international security issues. We have also reflected on the excellent state of our bilateral relations, in fact, of our bilateral, very good cooperation. With the ongoing Russian aggression against Ukraine, we face the biggest challenge to the European security since the end of World War II. Therefore, I very much appreciate today's discussion with our Macedonian partners, during which we have also exchanged ideas on the OSCE's role and its future mission. In my capacity of the chair of the OSCE, I also had the honor and pleasure to be received by the President of the Republic, Mr. Stevo Tendarovsky. I commend the significant progress made by North Macedonia in passing key legislative reforms in the recent years. Implementing reforms is extremely important from the social, political, but also economic perspective. These reforms also strengthen public institutions, government agendas, and above all, increase the trust of the citizens in public life. The OSCE, and particularly our mission in Skopje, stands ready to support efforts to implement these reforms, especially in crucial areas such as judicial and electoral reforms, the fight against corruption, transparency, good governance, and the rule of law. The OSCE mission works closely with our partners in relevant government ministries and other institutions where we provide help with a goal to support delivery of better services to Macedonian citizens. In the political sphere, we advocate for constructive dialogue and increased political participation. Let me also point out the role that Macedonia will have in leading the organization next year, which, especially these days, is a testimony of the country's great international responsibility. I look forward to Minister Osmani's presentation of North Macedonia's priorities before the Permanent Council in July, and I am certain that North Macedonia's principles will tackle challenges in all three dimensions of the OSCE's work, showing both continuity and adaptability. Thank you very much.
Mateusz Maranowski, TVP Info, Polish television. I got a question for Mr. Rau. French President Emmanuel Macron said that there are signs of war crimes in the Kyiv suburbs following massacres by Russian forces. President Macron spoke in the town of Irpin while on a visit with German, Italian, and Romanian leaders to show support for Ukraine. As OSCE chairman, how do you comment on this? Thank you.
Well, there is no doubt that Ukraine has been a victim of unprovoked, unjustified, and illegal Russian aggression since February 24th. And Ukraine has every right to be understood and supported. It's also quite natural that in the past more than 3 months, Kiev has been the place of many meetings of international leaders. So the present visit of the French President, German Chancellor, Romanian President, and Italian Prime Minister there is something more than natural and very needed. And this visit is taking place at a special time when other European leaders, including yesterday's visit of Macedonia's Prime Minister, Mr. Kovačevski, Čarnogóras, Pazovic, and Albania's Mr. Rama, took place. So the most important thing is to support Ukraine in the way that Ukraine itself considers appropriate. And perhaps I should add one thing. There are many reasons to advise Ukrainians, but the scope, content, and extent of these advices should be determined by Ukrainians themselves. Right now, to the best of my knowledge, they need, above all, unequivocal political support for their foreign policy. And of course, they need heavy weapons in order to defend their sovereignty, independence, and integrity, territorial integrity. Thank you.
Agnieszka Laskowska, Polish Television. Polsat to Minister Osmani. We've heard a couple of days ago from Chancellor Scholz that he managed to convince Bulgaria to stop its veto towards Macedonian negotiations process with the EU. How would you comment on that? And the other question goes to Polish minister. While we were leaving Albania, you've mentioned after meeting Montenegro's and Albanian politicians that you have a feeling of disappointment among those politicians, that the process of even beginning the negotiations with the EU goes too long, and that societies might be disappointed as well. Did you get this feeling here in North Macedonia as well, Minister? Thank you.
We are grateful for the efforts of German Chancellor, Germany, but also the French presidency for their efforts to move this process forward, and particularly for their timely visit, for his timely visit in Skopje and in Sofia last week. I think that the alarm all over Europe is on that the region needs strategical messaging, and that EU should take a strategic approach toward this region in the newly created geopolitical context. This region has transformed, has come a long way in the last 20 years, from war-entrenched region into a region that has established common regional market. And behind this substantial transformation always has been the European transformational power, or the transformational power of the European idea. The Russian aggression on Ukraine has shown the vulnerabilities of this region. There are so many open files in it. There is a permanent Russian influence trying either through proxy players or through manipulating with the emotions and frustrations of people from this stalemate with the EU process to bring this region into another direction which is not in the will of our people. And therefore we consider that it is time to leave the different political differences, even party differences in our domestic political landscape, but rather to raise to the level of our duties put into us, to take a strategic leadership and to send a message to this region that has shown unequivocal alignment with the position of EU and NATO in regards to the war in Ukraine. I will just take an example, North Macedonia, which has a 100% alignment rate with EU common foreign and security policies, joining all EU sanctions imposed over Russia, but also in meeting the criteria for EU membership. A country that has started this long journey 17 years ago. It had many obstacles on the way. Through a European approach has shown its capabilities, that it can bring an added value not only to the region but rather to EU. And I think that now it's time for EU to be clear and unequivocal in its messaging. What about this region? What about the countries that have fulfilled all the criteria, that have shown clear commitment and stance with the values that EU share? So it's now it's up to this strategic leadership, and I'm intentionally overemphasizing it because now EU enlargement process has become more than ever a security issue. Thank you so much.
Ma'am, answering your question, I must say that I fully support the argument my good colleague Bujar Osmani made. Indeed, there is no doubt in my mind that swift and conclusive accession process of the Western Balkan states to the EU is very much in the vital interest of the Western Balkan countries, but to the same degree it's in vital interest of each and every EU member state and the EU as a whole. Talking about the frustration that accompanies this process in the three countries I have been visited, I must say that this is a very visible and overwhelming social phenomenon. From the Polish perspective, we can imagine its essence, but we cannot imagine how widespread and how long it is, because we went through a similar procedure, but it lasted not longer than 10 years. In the case of our hosts, it's much longer, it's much more complicated. And I would like to add one thing. In order to imagine it, we have to take into account that societies of these countries have to support the reform process. democratic society, democratically elected leaders can achieve as much as the societies allow them to achieve. What kind of support can we expect after so many years of efforts which are not conclusive? So this is the perspective of the societies here, but there is another perspective of the political leaders. What kind of incentives do they have to pursue all these reforms if these efforts are not bringing them anything closer to the well-established and agreed upon political goal, which is the full membership of the EU? Thank you.
Zotëri Osmani pak më parë është shkarkuar kryeparlamentari bullgar, siç po shuhet nëpër media, domethënë sa do ta vështirësojë
Mr. Osmani, when it comes to the dialogue with Bulgaria, these 2 weeks leading up to the EU Council, how much are they going to make the negotiations with Bulgaria more difficult? Of course, this introduces a new unpredictability in the domestic political dynamics in Bulgaria. I would only remind you of what I said previously, that now it is up to the French EU presidency to assess whether there are the necessary prerequisites in Sofia for Sofia to take the next step. If they decide that independently of this development, we need to have additional efforts, we are here to become part of that process. We have worked a lot over the course of these 6 months, but also in the last few years. But we cannot help with anything the political stage in Bulgaria. But we can't impact it neither. It is time for strategic decisions, as we mentioned. It is time for Bulgaria to allow that the monument to the most successful story in the European Union, and that is of the EU enlargement, to be built, to be erected in Sofia. And it is up to it is from their policy that the future of 11 million people in the region is going to be depending on. Thank you.